Hello, thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Refining Rhetoric. I'm excited to talk to Andrew, a former CC student, one of the early CC pioneers, who is now one of the head fundraisers or the head fundraiser for the Heritage Foundation. We'll practice the 15 tools of learning and look more into crypto. So let's get started.
Classical Conversation Studios presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Refining Rhetoric. Today my guest is Andrew McIndoe, the Vice President of Development for the Heritage Foundation, an organization based in Washington, D.C., whose mission is to help build an America where freedom, opportunity, prosperity, and civil society flourish. Andrew was born, raised, and homeschooled, including a stint with Classical Conversations in the early days in Oak Ridge, North Carolina. He graduated with an MBA from the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business, which I hear is a pretty excellent school. And before that, graduated with a degree in political science from Grove City College. And he now lives in Alexandria, Virginia, with his wife, Haley, and two children, Charlotte and Augustus. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Robert, it's awesome to have you. And I don't want to start by getting in an argument, but you said I have a stint with Classical Conversations. Baby, I started at Challenge A before there were foundations or essentials. It went Challenge A, B, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, come on. It was more than a stint. Classical was essential in my upbringing, and I can't tell you what an honor it is to be on your show.
So you have more classical experience than I have, because I had 1, 2, 3, and then I went back and did a year of foundations and essentials as a 26-year-old because I didn't really learn too much at college.
If they offered me opportunity to go back and do foundations, I probably should. And maybe if we when and if we homeschool our kids, I'll pay a little bit more attention there.
Awesome. Well, I know you do a lot of things at the Heritage Foundation, but what is the Heritage Foundation for our listeners who may not be familiar with it?
Yeah, thank you. We are a public policy organization, so we're focused on coming up with ideas and legislation that's going to improve the lives of Americans. We do that by promoting limited government and free enterprise, traditional family values, and we believe in a strong national defense. So everything that we do is grounded in the Constitution and founding principles. We believe that what the founders outlined for us, it's a special gift in the way that they orchestrated this country. And we need to remember the wisdom that they, again, outlined for us in those founding documents. Too many politicians today believe that those things are living documents and they have changed in meeting. They have not. And we need to return to a nation of self-governance where people can be free enough to achieve prosperity and take advantage of opportunity. We believe in not equal outcomes, but equal opportunity. And so the Heritage Foundation works with members of Congress and state legislators and conservative movement allies to get those ideas out in the public sphere and turn conservative ideas into conservative policies, which are conservative victories.
That's great. And you guys, therefore, could identify what a woman is and may know what a recession is as well. Those things don't change at the Heritage Foundation.
Those things do not change. Up is up, down is down, day is day, night is night. It is unbelievable, Robert, I'll tell you, to have lived in the Washington, D.C. area for longer than I ever thought I would. Goodness, moved here after Grove City College in 2010. Never thought I would stay as long. Washington, the swamp's ability to change definitions is mind-blowing. Recession, male, female. Biden just a couple of weeks ago said that the economy is doing the best it ever has. Just total fabrications. And I could say worse things, but I'll refrain.
Yes, we may have some young listeners. And for those who know, we do record these, and this is actually being recorded in August. So we will be talking about some things that are going on today, and they may have different results by the time this episode comes out. But the Heritage Foundation seems like it resonates with a lot of people. There are over 500,000 members, I believe. So what does it mean to be a member of the Heritage Foundation? What are some of the benefits of membership and who becomes members?
Yeah, we're the nation's most broadly supported think tank. So we don't receive any money from the government. We receive very little corporate money. Less than 2% of all of our revenue comes from that. We are largely supported by generous folks across the country who want to join us in fighting to save America. They want us to set an agenda. They want politicians to govern according to those campaign promises and not change their minds once they start by saying that Washington, D.C. is a swamp. They come up here and they think it's a little bit more like a hot tub. If that resonates with you, you should be a member of the Heritage Foundation. We believe in rock solid ideas. We believe that ideas have consequences, that they matter, and that we need good policy to be implemented, a policy that rolls back the size and scope of the federal government. And so we're supported by people from all walks of life, from all 50 states. Again, more than actually 4 million people have been a Heritage member at some point in their lifetime. And you get access to our materials, access to events. Our news website is the Daily Signal. You get access to podcasts. To all those kinds of resources. Those are benefits of Heritage. But more than all of that, it's knowing that we're your voice in Washington. There are a lot of amazing people out there who hopefully will identify with a lot of what we talk about today, but God has not called them to be up here in Washington, D.C. and involved in the policymaking process. Giving to Heritage is a way to allow us to do that important work on their behalf. And I'll tell you, it's an amazing honor for me to be the VP of Development at Heritage. I'm responsible for making sure that our members have a seat at the table, that their voices are heard, and go out and recruit and travel members across the country. It's really an amazing honor to know that we, for many of our members, are their most important philanthropic endeavor outside of their church. And so if you're listening and you're a Heritage member, let me just say thank you.
Yeah. Well, we've been involved with the Heritage Foundation for a very long time and really appreciate the work that you are doing. And of course, as VP of Development, that's a very important role because, it takes money to do these things. And you're down there helping people see the value in having a conservative voice in Washington and helping us to fight back from a lot of this federal overreach that is, in my opinion, unconstitutional. So what are some of those things? They might not be as timely. They may have passed or not passed. We may have won the day by the time this podcast airs. But what are some of those bills at the moment that you guys are keeping an eye on and trying to educate people about?
We've identified 7 kind of primary issues that we're focused on, and I can talk about a number of them. I'll say one of the things that we are most focused on right now is reversing the growth of spending and inflation. The government spending, regulations, and inflation, it's just a straight up tax on all Americans, especially people who are working families who struggle to make ends meet. And we should be asking members of Congress to make prudent financial decisions, just like we do with our own household checkbooks that enable families to flourish without bureaucrats needing to control our lives. We're in a crazy inflation period. I'd be shocked if inflation in the economy improved between now and we're recording and this podcast goes live.
I do not see it improving in the next 18 to 24 months.
Just right now, in the midst of this recession that we are in, inflation eats away at an average of $6,800 in purchasing power for families that have 2 working parents. $6,800 of purchasing power that is gone away. And the so-called Inflation Reduction Act is going to increase taxes. They have manipulative federal subsidies in there, price controls on every American family. I hope that we're able to knock some sense into these politicians and bureaucrats here in Washington. And in November, this piece of legislation will have not passed. But too often people hear, what did President Reagan say? They act like drunken sailors when they're playing with the American people's money. That's going on right now, and it's ridiculous.
Some would say that's an insult to drunken sailors.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, again, Chuck Schumer, he wants to raise taxes by $750 billion over the next decade. Again, that's $4,500 per household. That's outrageous.
Well, that should help reduce inflation, seeing that the people who spend money in this country will have less of it to spend, right? I mean,
right, yeah.
In theory, that will help reduce inflation as we can't afford to buy anything.
It's a shame. I mean, the amount of corporate subsidies that are in there, the Green New Deal level policies. I mean, we're seeing price and goods of services produced in the U.S. reach an astounding 8.7% according to the GDP price index. That's the highest in 41 years. And so you cannot you cannot overestimate the impact that this is going to have on Americans across the country who are working hard. And goodness, I really hope that people show up to the ballot box in November and vote with their wallets because they're feeling it there.
Yeah, I've talked about the GDP in some previous episodes and how it's not even, they say it's the highest it's been in 41 years, but they've actually changed how they measure it over the past 41 years. And if you go back to see how they measured in the 1970s, it could be twice as high as it actually is being recorded. As you know, they tell us it's 8 or 9%. It's most likely somewhere between 15 and 20% if you use the previous formulas. Since we don't have the exact data available to us, it's hard to find out. But yeah, it's way higher than even they're telling us.
You're telling me that there are people in Washington who are moving the goalposts and formulas to make themselves look better? Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, Robert, the 1970s. That's the period that we're in again. This is stagflation all over the place. The average wages have fallen for Americans by $3,400 on average since Biden took office. If that doesn't look like Jimmy Carter and gas lines and high inflation prices, I just pray that we see a 1980 revival in the same in 2022 and 2024.
So, what's the foundation doing to help, and what's your work in that as well?
We think that putting out these ideas is important, setting that agenda. And so we've talked a little bit about government spending and inflation. There are other issues that are important to talk about as well. Education choices. Look at the crime, and the southern border that's being overrun. Ensuring free and fair elections. Countering the threat of communist China. Holding big tech accountable. Protecting unborn life and family formation. Those are really the big things that Heritage is working on. And it's making sure that we've got the policies there, but also the messaging around those things. Conservatives need to. We too often rely on numbers and data and logic to make a case. The name of this podcast is exactly what we need more of in Washington. We need rhetoric that's refined, and I hope that the Heritage Foundation is doing that. We've got messages that are tested, that resonate with the American people. We cannot just rely on Joe Biden to destroy himself. Yes, there are reckless, crazy, radical leftist policies. We need to continue to hammer those, but we need to create and provide a contrasting vision for America, a policy agenda that's totally different from the left, and get the American people something to vote for so that they then hold politicians accountable to actually enact those things. And, we very likely will, when this airs, hopefully there will certainly be a Republican House. I pray that there's a Republican majority in the Senate. That one is much closer. Biden will still be in the White House, but if it's a Republican Congress, we should be putting a bill every day on Joe Biden's desk and to make him veto. So there is that kind of policy contrast. That is going to be the winning formula for a conservative to hopefully take the White House in 2024.
Does the Heritage Foundation help write bills or put some of those things in place, or do they work with lawmakers to get that done? We
do all the above. We're looking at policy ideas, things like education savings accounts or health savings accounts that are things now. Those were ideas that started at the Heritage Foundation decades ago. So we're doing that kind of advanced policy work. We're working with members of Congress to write legislation, to help them introduce legislation. We are working to file FOIA requests against the Biden administration and suing the Biden administration for not giving the American people the information that they deserve. We are filing complaints on rules and regulations. The administrative state is just massive. It's the fourth branch of government, even more than working on Congress, or I should say, just as importantly as working with Congress. We need to get the bureaucracy back under control, and so we're doing things to identify rules that administrative agencies are making that we can go and stop in their tracks by filing complaints or asking questions and filing comments. And so we're doing all those things. The idea is working with members of Congress, fighting the Biden administration with lawsuits, doing those regulatory comments, and then doing the messaging as well. We've got a news outlet called the Daily Signal. I'd encourage everybody to check it out. There's a phenomenal morning email that's called the Morning Bell that goes out if you subscribe to that. And what we're trying to do there are to report the underreported stories, to do investigative journalism, to tell the stories that the mainstream media certainly is not going to tell because it's not in their best interest. It doesn't give them more power. There's a lot of truth out there that's just not reaching the number of people that it needs to reach, and the Heritage Foundation exists to increase that number.
This past Supreme Court, there was EPA versus West Virginia, and the court ruled that the EPA had overstepped their constitutional or congressional bounds. I know that there's stuff in the Inflation Act, which actually increases inflation by their own account, that gives them that power. So what has that ruling done from a heritage standpoint on your ability to stop the administrative state from stepping over their bounds? Have you all changed what you're doing or had more success since that ruling?
Yeah, we were thrilled with the Supreme Court shutting down the EPA's ability to totally re-engineer America's sources of electricity around a radical climate agenda that was based purely on the agency's expansive interpretation of a narrow provision of the Clean Air Act. This is an obscure Supreme Court case, right? Not something that's making it to most people, but the EPA put itself in that kind of position, and the court rightly determines that the EPA far exceeded its role by creating authority for itself that didn't exist. We work on a lot of Supreme Court cases every term. We were involved in the Dobbs decision, which we're thrilled about because we believe that every child needs to be protected from conception. And the Dobbs decision rightly returns the decision-making to the states. We believe in the 10th Amendment. We believe in federalism. And so, whether it was Dobbs or EPA or some of the gun control cases that came, we often do moot courts. I remember mock trial and Challenge B. What amazing training that was for me. Robert, do you guys still use the same case? I'm trying to remember what it was.
We've switched cases a few times now. So we have a new case that we wrote that we've started implementing.
Yeah, I just loved Challenge B and loved doing that. And we do something like that for Solicitor Generals of the United States of America. We bring them into Heritage and we do those kind of mock trials. We do that because we all need practice, and conservative lawyers need to get together, and because iron sharpens iron. And I can't go into more detail other than that, and saying that that's a service that we provide to the conservative legal community. And this was just a monumental term for the Supreme Court. I'm just reminded, though, of sitting at home. I live within a half a mile of Justice Alito in Alexandria, Virginia. And the number of nights now in the last couple of months where my wife and I have been sitting on our front porch and we just hear chanting. And then we start to hear police sirens, and it's just, drum beats. The protests that are happening for these Supreme Court justices, the lack of privacy that they have, the security that they need, the fact that they've had to flee Washington this summer because people are out protesting and villainizing them as individuals, just says so much about the state of civil discourse in this country. And so, it was an amazing Supreme Court term, and I'm grateful for the courage that a lot of those Supreme Court justices displayed, even in the face of adversity, as their homes are being encircled by radical leftists.
Well, I think, a lot of our listeners probably share the same values as the Heritage Foundation, but I know you'd said like a lot of people give to their church and then the Heritage Foundation. So, you were homeschooled growing up. You know how hard it can be with, one parent, really income. So can like regular homeschool families make a difference? How can they really get involved in politics, and what advice would you have for them?
Yeah. My parents, around the dining room table, instilled in me a great sense of civic duty. I remember going and doing kids voting with my dad growing up, conversations around policy. I got involved in a congressional campaign when I was in high school. I think I was maybe 14. It was my first job, and they gave me a flip phone. I was making $5.15 an hour and just kind of caught the political bug from there. Continued to be involved in policy and politics throughout college. I do believe that it's possible to make a difference. I think you can make a difference by making a $25 gift to Heritage. You don't have to do anything extraordinary, though we are grateful for that if people have the means, right? And it's my job to say that, so I will. But in addition to that, to spending some of your treasure, devoting time and showing up at school board meetings or town hall meetings, is an important thing that you can do. We've got a great sister organization that's Heritage Action for America. It's our lobbying arm. It's kind of our grassroots advocacy arm, Robert. And we've got a group of people there, 20,000 people across the country who identify as sentinels. And we train those people to write letters to the editor, to speak out and work with members of Congress, to do lobbying on issues that are important to them. There are a lot of ways like that you could be civically involved without having to devote any of your treasure. The other thing is devoting talents, right? So time, talent, treasure, right? Talents. We've got an amazing internship program here at the Heritage Foundation called the Young Leaders Program. It is the best internship in Washington, D.C. We provide housing. It's a paid internship. And I'll tell you, there's a ton of free food given out here at Heritage. So as a young, struggling intern, you get fed with nourishment for your body, but also with your mind and soul as those interns go through policy briefings and they learn how to be a professional. And we do resume workshops and we talk about opportunities professionally that they have to get involved, to make a career. It could be in Washington, it could be in Raleigh, North Carolina, or at Town Hall in Oak Ridge, North Carolina, where I grew up. But there are opportunities to invest your talent in those areas too. And we all feel and know that we're up against what feels like a Leviathan. It's a David and Goliath battle when you think about the resources and the numbers of people via the unions that the left has. We need smart, devoted, religious, conservative people to dedicate some of their talents, whether or not that's research or marketing or accounting, to come and work for conservative movement organizations who are on the front lines here every day trying to push back against the radical left.
I know one of the things you hear in society is you shouldn't talk about religion and you shouldn't talk about politics. And I think you obviously get a irreligious, godless government through that. And we can see that today. So what is your advice to listeners wondering about how to talk to their children about political issues?
Well, we've heard more and more in the course of the last 2 or 3 years that kids are already being talked about, or people are talking to them about
pronouns and
about
UIA
religion.
stuff,
yeah,
right?
All those things, right? Finally, parents across the country listened in to what was going on in their kids' classroom, and there's an uprising. Look at the gubernatorial race in Virginia, where Glenn Youngkin said parents should have a choice, and Terry McAuliffe said parents shouldn't have any say in their kids' education.
And I know Beto down in Texas just said that same thing again.
Yeah.
Parents shouldn't have any say in their kids' education.
That was not a smart campaign move. It did not work out for his counterpart here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So kids, and even in friend groups, right? If you're homeschooled, they're going to have influences by other people. You can't totally take that away. So what you need, those influences away, what you need to do is be really careful about what inputs there are to your kids. But politics and religion should be a part of dining room conversations. We got to this point because it was taboo. And a lot of people in my generation don't know what they believe because their parents never talked to them about what they should believe, never encouraged debates, never had those kinds of discussions. And so there's a lot of ships without rudders out there. And if you want your kid to grow up and have a thoughtful worldview, one that aligns with hopefully, right, your worldview as a parent, then you need to talk about what it means to be an American. We should be proud to be Americans. We don't need to apologize. And if they're hearing from secular influences, they're not going to understand that. You need to understand that religion should play a role in society. Yes, there's separation of church and state formally, but the founders had Judeo-Christian values, and those things enable and allow self-governance to happen. I could go on, but those conversations need to happen, and you need to encourage your kids to think critically. You should encourage them to research and go on websites like the Heritage Foundation. I got turned on to the Heritage Foundation by doing speech and debate in high school, did team policy debates, and I just found myself on the Heritage website saying, wow, I agree with this. And I can't believe that I have the honor of having served so far 10 years at the Heritage Foundation. That's how I got introduced to it.
That's great. And I know internships and co-ops meant a lot to me growing up. And that's one of the benefits of being homeschooled is be able to pursue some of those passions as a young person and not having the weight of paying rent or having to afford your bills, but being able to really stretch out your wings and fly.
Homeschooling provides you flexibility, right? I mean, I was able to go be a page in the North Carolina Senate, in the North Carolina House during the school year when it would have been really hard for me otherwise to take that time if I was in a government school. It's amazing how homeschooling allows you as a parent to let your kids follow their passions. And that's not all you need to do, right? But it's important to do if you believe in passions or strengths-based leadership. Homeschooling provides that. You don't get it through a rubber-stamped education that some bureaucrat at the Department of Education or the North Carolina Department of Education tells you.
Yeah, 100%. So I know we have a lot of homeschool parents that listen to this podcast, and no matter what, they're always fearful of their children's future. We know you and I know that they're going to get a great education because we were homeschooled in UCC. But what was it like for you transitioning from homeschool to where you are today?
I had and this is not to be boastful, but instead just to talk about the quality of the education that my parents gave me. I thought I had a much easier transition than a lot of my peers. I could talk to people of all ages. I could think for myself.
Yeah.
I could balance a checkbook. I understood the value of a dollar. I knew to ask questions around a lot of the woke ideology that even then was starting to permeate our culture. I knew what a man was. I knew what a woman was. And so the transition for me was one that I did confidently because of that upbringing, because of those foundations. Just being, again, it's critical thinking, being able to think for yourself, being able to talk to people of all ages, knowing that you need to bloom where you're planted, to go and make the most of every opportunity that's given to you. Those are things that you learn in classical or at homeschooling. I think better than almost anywhere. And so it was just great preparation, going and listening to a tutor, a master tutor, one day a week, and being responsible for your own work the other days. Wow. Does that teach you a lot about what it's like to be a professional, or what?
Absolutely. I mean, I always felt like I was more prepared for college and work than any of my peers because I had been doing that, that discipline and that type of rhythm for, 3 years in high school. Are you the youngest VP of development ever at the Heritage Foundation? I don't know if you know that or not.
I am. Yeah, I'm actually the youngest VP of Heritage ever. So I'm quite fortunate that they've given me as much opportunity as they have. It's an honor to be part of such a storied institution. We turn 50 next year and are dreaming about what the next 50 years look like. We're not giving up. We believe that we need to save the country. We believe that we can do it. We've got a good framework and plan that we are working on executing, and are grateful to have an incredible leader of the Heritage Foundation now, Dr. Kevin Roberts, who's new to us in the last 8 months, but comes to us from the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Kevin is an academic. He is winsome. He is faithful and has just been a tremendous person to work under. And I'm happy, Robert, every day that I walk into the drive into the parking garage and scan my key fob and know that I still have a job working on behalf of these ideas and trying to improve the lives for Americans all across the country.
Well, if someone else is interested in getting internship and maybe challenging you for the youngest VP ever, what's the process? Is there a website that they can go to, or how do they get involved if one of our listeners has a student that's interested, and what age groups is it for?
Yeah, there are two great things, two programs that we offer, and you could just Google this. The first is the Young Leaders Program, and that is our internship program. We do a fall, a spring, and a summer semester. Our applications are live online now for the spring, summer, and fall of 2023. That's a great program that, again, is full-time, based out of our headquarters here in Washington, and you can intern in all sorts of different departments at Heritage. If you're interested in policy, there are obviously a ton of great policy areas to work on. But if you're interested in operations and workplace services and accounting or fundraising or marketing, communications, there are opportunities in those departments as well. So I would encourage people to look at the Young Leaders Program on the Heritage Foundation website. It's heritage.org. The second opportunity is a program that we have called the Academy. And so maybe you don't want to come to Washington full time. Maybe you want to be able to do something
I don't.
While you're in school. The Academy program is something that exists in a time frame a little shorter than a semester, but still has great policy briefings, professional development, and is a way for people that smartly don't want to come to the swamp can still get involved and get that exposure and experience with the Heritage Foundation.
Well, I always say when I visit DC, I feel dirtier when I leave there than when I leave Vegas. But I'm glad that there's a bright light on the hill called the Heritage Foundation, and wonderful people who are almost missionaries in a foreign country in my mind, such as yourself. And just really proud of you and where you've gone. And Andrew is definitely one of the bright lights in the classical conversation graduates, but there are so many doing wonderful things just like him. And I just want to assure you parents that, we're not perfect here at Classical Conversations, but we're going to walk alongside you. And, there's, a lot of great things that you can get from a truly classical Christian education with the support of a community. And I hope you heard that from Andrew today. So you gave us the website, Andrew. Can you just give us like your social media places or other ways to connect with the Heritage Foundation, and just remind us of your news brief website as well?
You got it. The news website is called The Daily Signal. Go and sign up for the Daily Signal emails. You will appreciate to hear news that's underreported and investigative journalism from a conservative viewpoint. Check out heritage.org if you're interested in learning more about Heritage. Our sister organization, again, is Heritage Action. We're on all the social media platforms except for TikTok, because we believe that China is the biggest threat to our country, even more so than Russia. So we'll stay away from that and really don't like the big tech companies at all. But we're there, and you can follow us if you're so inclined, and we'd appreciate that. And hey, if you're ever in Washington, D.C. and want a tour of Heritage, me or my team would be happy to do that. It's a fun place to visit because there's so much history here. But Robert, I understand that you feel dirty when you leave. I certainly love going back to North Carolina as often as I can. I'm heading there in a couple of weeks, and thankfully get to travel a lot for my job and meet with Americans who are focused on building their own businesses and families. And it's refreshing to get outside of the swamp, but do feel like it's a mission field here. And I'm glad God has called me to be here for this time.
Yeah, I was just halfway teasing you.
Love it.
All right, Andrew, thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Well, it was really fun to reminisce with Andrew today. I know that you enjoyed this conversation. We're going to practice those 15 tools of learning together. And one of the things that we practiced with the 5 core habits of grammar is naming, and that's knowing the appropriate word. And we talked about inflation and really the importance of describing inflation as what it does to families, how it hurts normal families. So it's important to not just know what inflation definition is, but how that affects you and your loved ones. Next, in the 5 common topics of dialectic, talked about the tool of relationship and the importance of fundraising and the nonprofit work that they do at the Heritage Foundation, and how they both come hand in hand, where Andrew not only goes after high net worth individuals and get them to donate to the Heritage Foundation, but a significant portion of their funding comes from people like you and me who are just trying to become members or supporting when we have a little bit extra that we can do so. And that's really where a lot of their funding comes from. And finally, in the 5 canons of rhetoric, talk about delivery, which is the practice of presenting the best thoughts. And I know that Andrew went through the challenge program, and so that was a big part of gaining those skills that have allowed him to go from an intern at the Heritage Foundation to now leading the fundraising efforts at one of the world's largest conservative think tanks. And what a testimony of Classical Conversations education and the efforts that his parents put forth for that. Now let's talk about current events. One of President Ronald Reagan's famous quotes is, "The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, 'I'm from the government and I'm here to help.'" You may have heard about ESA's, Empowerment Scholarship accounts. They might go by Hope Scholarship accounts. They might not have these, thank the Lord, in your state yet. But I want you to know that neither political party will talk about why, as classicalists and as Christians, we should oppose government money in education. And so I want to do that with you today and looking at ESAs. Looking at ESAs, which are known as empowerment scholarship accounts. It might go by a different name, as I mentioned earlier. And I would encourage you now to just pause and go listen to our previous episode where I talk about property taxes, because that will give you some frame of reference as to this conversation. And if you haven't listened to that, go do so now. Now let's dive in. Today, we want to look at ESAs. You might not even have these in your state. They're called empowerment scholarship accounts. They might be called something like a Hope Scholarship, but they're the public government funding of private education. And this might be coming. It's going to be in the news a lot. Glenn Youngkin in Virginia won because he wanted to empower parents. And that's something that we agree with. We want to look at ESAs, though, and see, is that really empowering parents and what's really going on? And so we want to look at attending, which is the 5 core habits of grammar. And it's really differentiating the words from other known ideas. So you may have heard of an HSA or healthcare savings account, and that's privately funded. So we actually have one here at Classical Conversations. So one of the benefits are employees can opt into, and they can put some of their paycheck into it, and we do a little matching fund as well, and it helps cover some of their healthcare costs. That's different from an ESA, which is funded by your neighbors at a threat of their loss of house and home through their property tax or however else the government is funding education. So in Arizona, almost 50% of the Arizona state budget goes to education. They're the ones who just passed a very generous ESA, but what they're doing is taking money from your neighbors and giving it to you and your family if you opt into the system. In the 5 common topics of dialectic, we look at the tool of comparison, discovering similarities first and then differences. And in the cost of college, you may have heard, is skyrocketed. It's way above inflation, even though inflation is super high right now. But when did that occur? When did that start happening? One of the areas that really started launching this off is the Pell Grant, where the government started funding part of schools' college costs for certain students. And since then, the government has gotten more and more involved in the financing of college education. In the President Obama's term, they actually took away private funding, private loans of education, and federalized most of them. So ever since then, the government has given more money and the cost has increased exponentially. Good news for students is they all have a lazy pond, pool, little thing that they can go to. They get these new buildings, they get all of these things, but it's all funded through the government guarantee of these loans. And so we see when the government gives money to private citizens to spend, that the areas where they've spent that money, the costs have gone up exponentially. And you can see that in other areas as well. Let's look at delivery, which is one of the 5 canons of rhetoric. The people who are pushing this idea have a great catchphrase. It says the money should follow the child. And this idea that, we're already collecting all these property taxes, shouldn't it be used more effectively? What we really should be thinking about is following the money back to where it originated, which is in your neighbor's pockets through their hard work. So this isn't money that is owed to you. It is money that was taken from your neighbors at the loss of their home in order to fund your education. One of the things that people might not realize is government schools, public schools were started because Protestants didn't like that the Catholics had an established private school system. And so the Protestants said, well, let's force everyone to pay taxes and we'll put everyone into public schools and we'll give them a Christian education and we'll make sure that all the immigrants that are coming in are given our way of life. And so even from the start, public funding of education was pushed by Christians, and they had good intentions behind it. Help people really assimilate into the United States and help people get a good Christian education. We hear those same arguments made today, and under 100 years, that system has fallen apart, and we know how devastating it is. So there's no reason to think that this system will not fall apart as well. And the reason that we're going to address this is going to be a two-part series is, in my opinion, neither political party will talk about why, as classicalists and as Christians, we should oppose government money in education, and we should not look to expand government's influence into private education. And so in part two, we'll look at what the Bible says about whose responsibility it is to educate children, and what it says a little bit about money as well, which you can check out some of our previous episodes to hear about the Bible and money as well. So stay tuned for part two, launching it in our next podcast. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Refining Rhetoric, and something that I enjoy doing with my son, Trey, and one day with Jonah is going to our local Trail Life troop. Trail Life USA is a Christ-centered, outdoor-based discipleship opportunity for boys and young men from kindergarten through 12th grade. By joining a Trail Life USA troop in your area, your son will discover timeless biblical values with a group of peers and mentors. They've also got some stuff for dads as well. But your son will develop lasting relationships, experience character growth, serve their local community, acquire leadership skills, explore the outdoors, and gain practical skills like camping, emergency first aid, outdoor cooking, and more. With over 39,000 members and 900 troops across all 50 states, there's bound to be a Trail Life USA troop near you. It's also a great opportunity for homeschool dads looking for a way to spend time and instill values in their son while doing activities together. That's one of the reasons why I do it with my son. But you can learn more by visiting traillifeusa.com/homeschool. That's traillifeusa.com/homeschool. Now let's get back to our podcast.
Welcome to Classical Crypto with Will. Not long ago, I put out an episode called What is a CBDC? And if you recall, a CBDC is an acronym for Centralized Bank Digital Currency. Additionally, the point I was essentially making was this. It appears that the government is trying to find a way to utilize blockchain technology, which would be a great upgrade from our current system, but instead of taking the decentralized approach, a centralized, non-anonymous CBDC is what they're talking about. In the opinion of many, this is a setup for a highly regulated, controlled, and centralized system. I truly hope people are paying attention to this. Sadly, most folks don't even really know what cryptocurrency is, which would be the starting point to understand how powerful and possibly destructive a US CBDC could be. Just research China's digital yuan and how they've tied it to their social credit system. In my opinion, it's terrifying. On this podcast, we talk about education, business, and current events. So when I saw Jerome Powell's comments on a recent digital currency forum, I was a little shocked. I thought it was definitely a current event, breaking news. And for anyone who doesn't know, Jerome Powell holds a very powerful position as the chair of the U.S. Federal Reserve. Now I'm going to read a small portion of his comments when he directly addresses the U.S. potential CBD interests. And I quote, "We think that there are 4 characteristics if we pursue a CBDC. At a minimum, these would be the 4 characteristics. First is intermediated. Second is privacy protected. Third is identity verified, so it would not be anonymous. And fourth is transferable or interoperable." Wow, and he just flat out said it. It would not be anonymous. I'm guessing he was addressing a journalist or reporter when he communicated this, and I'm sure that he was directly asked if the CBDC would be anonymous or not. And we shouldn't be surprised. Why would a centralized institution create a decentralized or truly private currency? Of course they wouldn't. I'm informing. I'm definitely not trying to strike fear, but hey, stay informed. And if you're wondering if Jerome Powell's comments last month were just a one-off event, go to the official Federal Reserve website, thefederalreserve.gov, and type in CBDC. You should find a few paragraphs of a report dated June 13th, 2022. It starts, and I quote, While the Federal Reserve has made no decisions on whether to pursue or implement a central bank digital currency, or CBDC, we have been exploring the potential benefits and risks of CBDCs from a variety of angles, including through technology research and experimentation. What can we take away from this? The Fed, the US government, they're looking into CBDCs, and it seems to be of major interest to me. Do your own research and join me next time for Classical Crypto with Will. God bless.
Well, thank you for tuning in today. We are excited to be wrapping up our first year podcasting. I can't believe it. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to listen to some of our previous ones and get excited for our plans for 2023. You won't want to miss it.